This is Groundeffected. This guy's name is Drizzt, and welcome to running out of the exact color of paint that you need while you're working on a project. In this video, I'm going to show you how I painted Drizzt. This is a character that was custom sculpted, and yes, unfortunately, this is another one of those models that you can't get for yourself, but that doesn't mean you can't watch the video and take maybe one or two tips, perhaps learn something. And before we carry on, make sure to leave a like, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and let's just get on with the video then, bruh. Now, I most certainly cannot lie to you and tell you that I know anything about this character. If you think I know nothing about Warhammer, then this dude I know even less about. But that doesn't stop me from being able to smack him with a bit of pigment and make him look sick as frick. So to start off with this model, I was given a load of images that were mostly just brown. The character itself is a very brownish character. All of his outfit is mostly brown. His coat is like a dark green. It's very dark and not very pleasing. In my opinion, doesn't come across very fantasy-like. My customer asked me to make the character look more fantasy. He wanted him to be brighter, with more contrast, and not look as drab as the characters usually look in some of the depictions of him. So to start this off with, his pants, instead of doing them brown, I'm gonna do them black. But I'm gonna add a bit of saturation to them by putting a bit of blue into my black and spraying this from the top. I'm gonna be creating a highlight over the black. By using blue, I'm not desaturating the black, so it's not going to be a grey, it will look black. The blue will essentially be like light reflecting off the surface of the black. Once I was done with his pants, I started the work on his boots. I kept the black base coat that I had painted originally, and I sprayed a sort of reddish brown over the top, making sure to leave some of that black in the base. This is doing a lot of the work for me, so rather than having to paint two colors on there to get a shade and a shape and everything out of it, I can essentially cheat my way into doing that by just using a black base rather than a gray or a white base. I used a wash to go over certain features on the boots just to try and make them stand out so the color was slightly different to the average color of the boot. Once I had got the base layers down on the boot and I was happy with that, it was time to start work on the straps that go across the back of the boot, holding the shin guards on. I'm pretty sure this guy plays soccer in his spare time and he needs these shin guards in order to protect his shins from the rough barbarian other team. These straps look very strong and will definitely hold those shin guards on no matter what he encounters. In order to paint the actual armor, I wanted it to be like a deep reddish kind of burgundy sort of armor. I don't want this leather to look brown. Like I said, we're not doing just a brown character, but I do still want the depth of that color. I need the value of the brown, but not the color of the brown. I hope that makes any sense. But basically, in order to create that, I'm going to use this Flesh Terror's red contrast paint, which will be thin enough to show some of the black underneath it and help that color not look too stark. I'm going to use my favorite gold recipe, which is from Monument Hobbies Pro Acrylic, and I'm going to paint that over all the gold buckles and the little studs across the armor. Now for his awesome skirt, I need to paint this green. Yes, in some of the pictures, it's not green. My client is still not really sure about the green, but he sent me a picture, and in that picture, there was a green skirt. And the green skirt looked so much better than all of the brown skirts, so in this image, we made him have a green skirt. Dear Mr. Customer, if you're listening to this, I hope you haven't changed your mind, and you're still keeping the green skirt, because I like the green skirt. In order to make that green skirt shine a little bit more and make it a little bit more textured, I'm actually just going to dry brush a little bit of a lighter green just into the highlights of this. Now the arms that come out of the top of the body are, yes, that is where arms come from, but these arms are painted in the same way that I painted the pants. I used the same blues mixed with the blacks to create the highlights and a little bit of dry brushing to catch the edges. On his chest, I painted that armor brown. Yes, I know I said I didn't want brown, but we are going to add some brown to this piece. Whilst that was drying, I went back onto the hand pieces and I painted the armor that was on the hands. As you can see throughout this entire paint job, there is a major theme. A lot of these colors are quite dark, but using them in contrast with each other, there is still saturation. Without losing that saturation, I'm still able to give the impression that the character is browny, drabby, kind of dark, armory, weird eared shaped white-haired dude. Across all the armor, I went through with a pin wash, which is basically a panel liner wash from Tamiya, and I run that all along in all the creases just to create a bit of grime, so it almost looked like the pieces had worn a little bit in, and there was a bit of the color coming out in between where the folds and straps kind of went over each other. I painted the armor across his chest and went into the straps to paint them as well. I used the same sidewall brown as I did on his straps across his legs and on his arms. I then went back in with that panel liner and I pretty much painted all the little creases and gaps. Again, this just gives it a bit of a grimy look and helps to sell the effect of the leather. I painted the symbol or the little pendant that's on his chest with a gold on the outside, and I used the silver in the center. Looking at all the images, it appears this is how it's done. Again, if it's not done like that, I'm pretty sure I'll be told by my customer and I will have to change it to whichever color suits him best. But as a commission painter, that doesn't bother me because this is what we do. We paint things that other people can envision but aren't able to do themselves. If you have chosen to do commission painting, the best thing I can say to you is just embrace the fact that you are actually performing some kind of skill for someone else. You're not painting this thing for yourself. You're doing what someone else can't do. So trying to work with the client as well as bringing in your own artistic flair is probably a super fine balance. I find the way that I like to do it is if you pick the artist that best suits the style you want, you allow him to run with certain things, you are going to get your best outcome from it. It's when you sort of pick someone that's not suited to the style that you're wanting to do that perhaps you might have a problem matching what you have envisioned in your mind. And now to come back from that sidetrack, I'm just going to work on the fur that goes around this coat on his neck. I'd eventually painted the cape green, and again I used a similar technique to his skirt. I did the same with the hood that goes on the piece that goes above his cape. Essentially this is his hood which is connected to his cape, but these two parts come apart like this. I used a couple of washes to spray from the bottom on this section. I wanted this fur to look dirty. I do not want it to look anything like his hair, because it would be kind of weird if he was picking out his hair to make his little fur coat. So I need to make sure that this doesn't look the same, and the way I'm going to do that is by using a couple of washes, specifically that brown yellow kind of wash, because that's going to make it look dirty and kind of worn in, as opposed to his hair, which is something he probably would wash more than he would wash his coat. Not that I'm suggesting Drizzt ever washes, in case that goes against any kind of Dungeons and Dragons lore, but let's just pretend Drizzt is like a space marine and he washes 25 times a day. For the swords, I didn't do too much crazy on them. I spray painted a chrome which I allowed to dry very well, and I used some dark silver to spray kind of from an angle just to get a little bit of grip in the light that goes across the sword. If it's just one solid color, sometimes that doesn't appear very good to your eye, but in order to create a bit more depth, I'm going to use a bit of black and a little bit of dark silver just to create some depth across the top of it. The other sword has a blue glow, so to create that, I'm going to mix a couple of blues together just to get the right kind of electric type of blue that I'm looking for, and I'm going to paint that across the sword. Using my airbrush just at a specific angle will help me to get the effect that the light is kind of emitting or bouncing off of it, rather than just a solid paint stroke. This definitely can be done with just a paintbrush, however it will take a little bit longer, and in my case time is of the essence. I'm pretty sure I've showed this trick before, but in order to mask things you can just use blue tack. Yes, mine looks pink, but you can use blue tack to mask some things if you need to spray paint something that's in an area that you've already painted. I trimmed the sword with the gold mix that I usually make, and then I started to work on the face of Drizzt. For this character, the first of all 4 faces that I'm going to be doing, the first one is going to be a black dude. This dude is going to have a very purple tone to him. When you look at the books and the pictures of Drizzt, he has this very purplish tone to him. Now, one of the faces is going to be purple, but I felt like adding that purple to the character in the black form is going to give him a little bit more saturation and a little bit more life. Once again, going back to the whole commission thing, it's up to my client how he wants these faces to be. So I will now liaise with my client, and if there is any changes, we will make them from here, and this will be tuned in to exactly what he was looking for. To complete the look, I'm going to use a couple of washes and I'm going to spray them from the shadows, as well as some purples, a dark wash from Army Painter. I'm going to use these to create a lot of contrast in it. Some of these washes can be a little bit too shiny when they dry, so in order to make it look a bit more matte, one of the best things I've actually recently found is this Galleria Acrylic Mediums Matte Varnish. And this stuff can be thinned and put into paints to make them more matte, or you can just use it as a varnish on its own. I do find that some of the spray paint varnishes do tend to be a little bit too satin, and in order to bring this down, I will spray them for sealant and then I'll use the matte varnish from Galleria over the top of that just to matte them down a little bit. For his eyebrows, I'm going to use the same color that I used for his hair at the base, and I'm going to paint that just kind of in a dry brushing fashion, but with a slightly wetter brush, just to pick up the ridges of his eyebrows. The eyebrows on this model are sculpted quite well, so there is a lot of ridges to pick up and create some depth and texture. The eyes is nothing new. I do this on every single model. I paint a dark brown or a black inside of the eye first. This shapes the eye. Make sure to get the edges of the eye so that when you come in with the whites of the eyes, you're going to save a tiny little line of black just around the eye, which will help frame and shape the eye and make it look a lot tidier and neater. Once again, if you don't like the way that I do eyes, you are welcome to do your own way. There is many other tutorials on the internet. This is the way that I like to paint faces and eyes in specific. I am a very graphic type of artist, so for me, this is how I like my characters to look. But hopefully this helps someone, and at this point is when I decided to call the model done. It is a miracle that I've managed to make it to the end of a video and I haven't knocked another model over. This is pretty good. I'm doing very well with not knocking models over, so I'm going to continue putting them in precarious positions. Also, now that we are at the end of the video, I'd like to give a super special thanks to my Patreons. It's because of them that my eyeballs are able to be blinded by the lights that blind my eyeballs. And we've got a couple new patrons I'd like to thank right now. Big Pig and Nathan Peel. Oh, I nearly knocked it. Thank you dudes so much for your support. It really helps the channel, and this is what helps keep the lights blinding my eyeballs and the videos rolling. If you want to make sure that you can see the next video that I make, the best thing you can do is click the subscribe button and click the little notification bell. It will make YouTube send you a notification when I upload another video onto YouTube. Of course, you also need to go in the bottom of the video and there's a little box that YouTube gives you a space to write some words. I would like for you to write some words. And speaking of those words, I'd like to get just a little bit serious for 3 seconds if we can. One of my good viewers, Joe, happened to have something happen to him yesterday. He had something happen with his heart. I'm not 100% sure what it is. It's also not my place to really talk about that too much. But my dude ended up in the hospital and the doctors did some good work. He's recovering and watching the videos. So Joe, I hope if you're watching this, just know that we are all thinking of you. And if everyone else isn't, I will make them think of you and your recovery. Hopefully it's a fast one and get straight back to that painting desk as soon as possible, my dude. And everybody that watched the video, you already know what we're getting to at the end of the video. If you didn't like anything you saw in this video, the best thing I can say to you, my dude, just click the dislike button and then please f off. That was really close. I bumped it at least twice. Oh my god, it's gonna happen.